What if the most real thing about your life isn't what you can touch or prove or explain, but what you dare to imagine in silence? There is a world that moves behind your eyes, a world that listens when you speak without sound, a world that rearranges itself quietly and obediently in response to the invisible truths you carry within. This world is not a fantasy, it's not an escape, it's the blueprint, the origin, the first cause of everything you will ever call real. And until this moment, you may have mistaken it for something childish, something less than the facts. But the facts, as you've known them, have only ever been shadows cast by the light of what you imagined yesterday. Neville Goddard didn't teach imagination as a metaphor. He didn't ask you to pretend or to dream as a hobby. He asked you to return to the place of power you've always had and forgot. He said, "Imagination creates reality." And if that's true, then everything you're waiting for is already formed in a world that responds only to your inner acceptance. You are not here to chase what's outside. You're here to assume what's within and watch as the world follows. Plato called it the world of forms, an unseen dimension where every perfect idea already exists. The ideal version of you, the one who's free, whole, abundant, deeply at peace. That version is not ahead of you, it's within you. And what you call reality is simply the echo of what you've dared or failed to believe as already true. Science now echoes this same wisdom. Dr. Bruce Lipton showed how the body doesn't respond to truth, it responds to perception. Your cells, your hormones, even your genetic expression are all listening to the way you interpret your life. Which means belief doesn't just shape your emotions, it sculpts your biology. Imagination isn't decoration, it is instruction. You are programming your being in every unseen moment, every assumption you don't even realize you've made. And yet, there's a tension, isn't there? A part of you that still trusts the illusion more than the source. A part of you that believes the numbers in the bank account more than the wealth in your vibration. A part that believes the silence from others more than the voice of truth inside you. But it's not your fault. You were raised to believe that reality comes first. That facts are final, that the dream is a bonus if there's time. But the truth is reality is slow, reality is delayed. Reality is a loyal servant that only obeys what imagination has already scripted. And that's why so much of your struggle has been invisible, because the most powerful part of you has been unseen, untrusted, and unheard. So let's begin here, with a deeper truth. Imagination is the architect, and your current life is just the construction site. It's noisy, unfinished, imperfect, but it is faithfully building what you have already accepted as possible. It does not question, it does not choose, it just follows orders. Today, you remember who you are. Today, we enter the true world, the one behind your eyes, the one where everything you've ever wanted already lives. Not in some distant future, but now, quiet, real, waiting for you to finally say, "Yes, I accept that this is who I am," because the dream is not fiction. The dream is foundation, and from this moment forward that we stop treating imagination like a wish and start honoring it as law. There was a time when the mind was seen as sacred, when imagination was honored as the bridge between the visible and the invisible, when vision was not something you chased but something you gave life to from within. But somewhere along the way we forgot. Not because we stopped dreaming, but because we were taught to doubt what we dreamed. You've been trained since childhood to worship evidence, to look for confirmation before allowing belief, to silence the voice of intuition because it didn't sound like logic. And every time you waited for proof before permission, you unknowingly stepped further away from the throne of your own creative power. There is a kind of hypnosis in the world today, a cultural spell that says if you can't see it, it's not real. And under that spell, imagination has been reduced to entertainment. Your inner world has been treated like a soft escape, not a sovereign place of construction. But the real tragedy isn't that others dismissed your imagination, it's that you started doing it too. Modern neuroscience reveals what ancient mystics already knew. Under chronic stress, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of vision, planning, creative foresight, begins to shut down. The mind becomes reactive, not generative. You stop imagining what's possible and start repeating what's probable. You stop creating, you start surviving. And survival, while necessary for the body, is devastating for the soul. And yet, this is not the full story, because beneath the conditioning, beneath the noise, the architect is still alive. That part of you who sees what hasn't yet happened, but feels it as if it has. That part of you who doesn't need permission to feel worthy, who doesn't ask for evidence to trust the unseen. Maybe you've noticed moments when this architect speaks, a flash of knowing, a sudden calm in the middle of panic, a whisper saying this isn't the end, something else is coming. That voice has never left. It's only been waiting for you to stop handing your power to appearances. What happens when you give imagination one uninterrupted hour? Not to beg, not to doubt, but to construct. One scene, one version of you, lived in with so much presence, so much inner clarity, that it begins to feel more familiar than your current life. That's not escapism, that's training. That's sovereignty. Imagine your imagination as a kingdom once ruled with grace and brilliance, but over time the king left the throne, and the kingdom fell into quiet chaos. Today is not about rebuilding from scratch, it's about returning, reclaiming, remembering the seat you abandoned and the power that was never taken, only forgotten. Because you were never meant to follow what is, you were meant to design what will be, and that design still begins inside you. What if every event in your life was following a script you didn't even know you were writing? Neville Goddard taught that the world you see is not random, it is not chaotic, it is not separate from you. It is, in fact, a delayed mirror, showing you the residue of your most persistent assumptions. He said, the assumption hardens into fact, not by effort, not by repetition, but by acceptance. What you accept inwardly, the world is compelled to display outwardly, even when you forget you ever accepted it. Inside your mind is a movie projector, and the scenes it plays, your fears, your hopes, your expectations, are all loaded into the reel through imagination. The outer world has no choice but to screen whatever film is being played behind your eyes. This is not metaphor, this is law, and the sooner you believe it, the sooner you can stop waiting for life to surprise you and begin designing it with precision. Your brain is not a passive observer. It's an editor. The reticular activating system, your internal filter, scans every second of your environment, highlighting what matches the pictures you've held inside. That's why the more you imagine a version of life, the more you notice signs, patterns, chances, as if the world is responding. It is, but not because it's outside of you, because it's a reflection of you. And when things seem to just happen out of nowhere, when you call it luck or coincidence, look closer, because nothing is random. The job offer, the unexpected text, the elevator meeting, the smile from a stranger, all of it is tied to the blueprint you drew, often without realizing your pen was in motion. That's why night is sacred, because in the quiet before sleep, your mind becomes most fertile, most impressionable, most willing to receive a new design. So what if, instead of reviewing your day as it was, you began to replay it as it could have been? What if you rehearsed the scene you wanted until it felt familiar? That is not fantasy. That is instruction. That is the subconscious being gently guided toward construction. Imagine reality as a 3D printer. Matter is the plastic. Time is the machine. But the blueprint? That comes from the digital file. And in your life, that file is formed in imagination. Every thought saturated with feeling, every assumption carried with certainty, becomes a code the world is forced to translate. So don't ask why the world looks the way it does. Ask what inner vision it's been obeying. The dream you hold in silence is not waiting for permission. It is already building. The only question is, are you the one giving it direction, or letting it run on loops you no longer even remember choosing? Because the unseen is not distant. It is designing, always. And what it builds next begins with what you dare to see now. There is a fundamental truth that often feels like a secret. Your body is not a separate machine reacting to a distant world. It is a living echo of the stories you hold. When you change the story, the echo shifts. This is not poetic speculation. Bruce Lipton's work shows that cells respond not merely to chemical commands, but to the perception that the mind hands them. The body receives the meaning you give to life and translates that meaning into chemistry, posture, and habit. In other words, belief speaks in the language of biology. Think about a moment when you felt utterly certain, so certain that your shoulders loosened, your chest opened, your voice carried a different tone. Notice how the world responded, the way people listened, opportunities aligned, risks dissolved into possibility. That physiology of certainty is not the result of external proof. It is the consequence of an inner assumption made visible. Your nervous system is the instrument through which imagination plays its music. When imagination conducts with calm, the body follows the score. This is why the small, repeated acts of feeling matter more than dramatic rituals. A micro-shift in breath, a change in posture held for a minute, a phrase spoken aloud with steady tone. These are not trivial. They are signals. They teach your cells a new vocabulary. The somatic system learns through repetition. It begins to expect the state you habitually embody. Over time, your muscles, glands, and autonomic rhythms begin to mirror the identity you practice until your biology itself becomes proof of what you assume. There is a practice that is deceptively simple and quietly powerful. Inhabit the identity you wish to be in small, believable ways. Let your shoulders carry the weight of that new self as if it were already ordinary. Let your breath reflect calm instead of anxiety. Speak with the cadence of someone who owns the life you imagine, not for show because showing requires effort, but until effort fades and the state is ordinary. As your physiology confirms the feeling, your subconscious reclassifies it from fantasy into fact, and the outer world begins to align with that internal legislation. Remember that this is not magic. It is biology obeying signal. Your body does not judge your dream. It only listens for instructions. The irony is gentle and relentless. We expect our cells to wait for the world to change, when the cells are the very instruments that translate our inner world into outward evidence. If you want your life to be different, begin by giving your body a different script, one written by quiet, repeated assumption rather than frantic effort. You do not have to force it. You only have to be precise and present. Breathe into the new identity. Allow the chest to soften around gratitude. Let the voice settle into calm authority. Do this again and again until the body remembers. When the body sings the song of your imagination, the world has no choice but to listen. You already are the signal. Your biology is simply catching up. Imagination does not discriminate. It does not pause to evaluate your desires or question your fears. It simply amplifies whatever image you hold with clarity and emotion. That is why it feels so easy to fall into worry and so difficult to stay in faith. Because imagination, when unguarded, turns into a rehearsal for the very things you say you don't want. Worry is not just a mental habit. It is inverted creation. It is imagination misdirected, working flawlessly to build scenes of delay, loss, rejection, or stagnation. Every vivid inner argument, every feared outcome rehearsed at night, every silent assumption that things will probably go wrong is a blueprint being quietly handed to the world. And the world, neutral, faithful, delayed, simply obeys. You may feel that life is against you, that you've been blocked, sabotaged, held back by invisible forces. But what if those forces are not outside you? What if they are the echoes of past visualizations, of inner conversations you forgot you were even having? Not as punishment, but as perfect reflections of what you once believed. The harsh truth is this: imagination never stops working. The only question is whether it is working for your liberation or your limitation. The shift begins not with blame, but with awareness. To become aware of what you've been feeding the soil of your subconscious. To gently, compassionately notice the patterns you've nurtured. What have you been imagining every time you didn't get the call back? Every time the money didn't show up? Every time you looked in the mirror and sighed? Those moments are not passive. They are instructional. And the body, the mind, the universe all listen. Trace the emotions of the past week. Ask what scenes you've been building in the background, not through willpower, but through emotional agreement. What you felt repeatedly has already started to harden, and what you feared with vivid detail has already begun taking shape, unless you've interrupted it with a new choice. It's like holding a magnifying glass over weeds instead of flowers. The sun is not to blame. The earth is not to blame. The power of life is always at work. But the direction of that power, that belongs to you. You cannot turn off imagination, but you can turn it around. You can begin to notice where your mind has wandered and reclaim it, not with force but with devotion, because the same tool that has built suffering with such accuracy can also build freedom with elegance. The lens is not broken. It was just pointed at the wrong truth. And today you remember you are the one holding it. You can think the right thoughts. You can speak the right words. You can visualize the most beautiful scenes in your mind. But if you do not feel it, the seed does not take root. Neville Goddard called this the secret behind the secret. Feeling is the bridge between idea and incarnation. It is not just the decoration of a thought, it is the power that activates it. A thought, no matter how positive, without emotion is like a script never rehearsed. But when a thought is saturated with feeling, it becomes alive. It becomes magnetic. It becomes inevitable. Science agrees. Neuroscience shows that the subconscious does not store facts. It stores emotion. What you feel is what it remembers. That is why trauma imprints so deeply, not because of the story itself, but because of the emotional charge behind it. The same law applies in reverse. If you want to rewire your identity, it is not enough to repeat new words. You must give them breath. You must let your nervous system believe them through sensation. This is the reason affirmations often feel hollow. You say, "I am abundant," but inside your chest there is doubt, tension, silence. The words float, ungrounded, disconnected from your nervous system. Until they are infused with emotional congruence, they do not reach the subconscious. Because the subconscious listens not to language but to chemistry, and feeling is chemical agreement. So what happens when you begin to feel, not hypothetically but biologically, the state of your wish fulfilled? When you rehearse success, not by imagining the outcome, but by feeling the hormones of peace, satisfaction, safety, the body begins to shift. The mind begins to agree. The world begins to mirror, not instantly, but precisely. There is a moment when the body begins to believe the dream is real, not because of logic, but because the emotional atmosphere matches the memory of something already lived. That is the threshold where manifestation becomes natural, where effort dissolves and alignment takes its place. Imagine a theater. Thought is the script, but without electricity the stage remains dark. Feeling is the light. It animates, it reveals, it invites the audience of reality to gather and respond. So today, stop asking if your thoughts are correct. Ask if your emotions are aligned. Ask if your body feels what your words declare. And if not, pause, breathe, shift. Because when the feeling is present, the creation has already begun. There comes a moment on this path when the external world seems louder than your inner knowing. When the bank account, the silence from others, the slow pace of change, begin to question your faith. And if you are not anchored within, you might mistake those facts for truth. But facts are not truth. They are remnants. They are echoes of what you believed yesterday. Most people surrender to evidence. They look at circumstances as if they are the final verdict. But Neville reminds us, what you see is not the cause. It is the consequence. The world is delayed. It shows you not what is true, but what has been accepted. The facts in front of you are not warnings. They are reports, and those reports are always behind. Quantum physics calls it the observer effect. The moment something is witnessed, it behaves differently. In other words, your attention alters the outcome. You are not here to observe reality passively. You are here to interact with it, shape it, tune it, to match your internal conviction. Your faith is not a fragile hope waiting for proof. It is the instrument that summons proof into form. There is a sacred strength in remembering that contradiction is not a sign of failure. It is often a sign that the old belief is dissolving, and the new one is forming beneath the surface. When things appear unchanged or even regressing, the natural tendency is to doubt. But what if you recognize this phase for what it truly is? A lag, a delay, a necessary space between what has been planted and what has sprouted. When you stand in front of a mirror and smile, the reflection does not move first. You do, and reality behaves the same. What you feel now becomes what you see next. And that gap between inner decision and outer reflection is where most give up. But this is where you must remember, the data is old. The result you are looking at is already expired. So the next time the world shows you contradiction, pause, not in panic, but in presence. Say to yourself, this is not the truth. This is the past catching up, and keep your gaze steady. Keep your vibrations steady, because the world is still updating. And what you now embody, consistently and emotionally, will soon become what you call fact. Faith is not blindness. It is vision before the evidence arrives. And once you understand that the mirror only reflects, not decides, you will no longer wait for proof. You will become it. There is a voice inside you that never stops speaking. Even in silence, it speaks. Even when you're unaware, it's narrating. This voice doesn't just describe your world, it designs it. Neville Goddard called it the seed of destiny, the inner conversation. And whether you recognize it or not, it is creating echoes that become your lived experience. What you say to yourself, about yourself, when no one is listening, that is the blueprint the world follows. If your inner dialogue is saturated with doubt, hesitation, or apology, don't be surprised when life mirrors back uncertainty and delay, not as punishment, but as reflection. Because your words, especially the unspoken ones, are signals. They teach the subconscious what to expect. Language is not neutral, it is formative. Cognitive science shows that the words we use, especially repeatedly, restructure the brain's patterns of perception. What you keep saying internally begins to define what you notice, what you expect, and ultimately, what you receive. This is not just about thinking positively. It's about realizing that neutrality is an illusion. Even silence becomes agreement when it echoes your old identity. There is no such thing as not affirming something. You are always affirming through your thoughts, your feelings, your reactions. And unless you consciously shape your inner speech, it will default to the oldest script in your nervous system. That's why change often feels hard. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're still narrating from the voice of the past. Shift your words, and your world begins to shift. Speak as the version of you who already knows the outcome. Let your self-talk be grounded not in hope, but in remembrance. Speak from completion, not from craving. This doesn't mean reciting empty phrases. It means choosing a tone of voice inside you that aligns with your new identity. When the mind says, "Nothing is changing," gently respond, "Of course it is. I just haven't seen the reflection yet." When the thought arises, "What if I fail again?" answer with calm, "That story has ended. I've chosen differently now." This isn't denial, it's authorship. It's claiming your power to narrate, to frame, to direct. Think of your inner dialogue as the algorithm curating your life feed. What you speak within becomes the pattern you live without. If you want a new experience, you don't need to fight the old one. You need to speak the new one until the world begins to echo back what your soul already knows to be true. Look around and you'll see structures made of stone, systems made of paper, boundaries made of belief. Money, borders, governments, rituals, none of these are laws of nature. They are collective imaginations, held in place not by force, but by agreement. Agreement so old and repeated it became invisible. But behind every social structure is the same truth. Someone imagined it first. Culture is a mirror of mass assumption. It's not just your personal beliefs that shape your life. It's the shared ones too. And just as your individual thoughts sculpt your experience, the collective thoughts of humanity sculpt the world we live in. When millions of people imagine fear, disease, and division, that vibration ripples through biology. Bruce Lipton has shown how collective stress patterns influence mass physiology, how widespread fear creates real changes in the body, the immune system, and even gene expression. That's not theory, that's chemistry. But here is the hidden power. When one person changes their frequency, they begin to emit a new signal into that shared field. And when many gather in emotional unity, not just in thought, but in felt coherence, they begin to reshape what is possible for everyone. You don't need to convert others. You only need to embody a new vibration so clearly that it becomes part of the collective atmosphere. Imagine each mind as a projector. Alone, your vision lights up a single screen, but together many projectors form a cinema, the shared dream we call reality. And when even a few of those lights begin to play a different movie, the entire picture starts to shift, not through conflict, but through resonance. You may not see the results immediately, but your internal state is never private. It contributes, always. When you hold peace in a world addicted to urgency, you offer a new rhythm. When you assume abundance in a culture of lack, you destabilize scarcity. And when you refuse to imagine from fear, even quietly, you create space for a different kind of future. You are not small. You are not alone. Your inner work is not separate from the evolution of the world. Every time you imagine something higher and feel it as real, you are voting with energy for the world you wish to live in. The more of us who do this, not in noise, but in clarity, the more inevitable that world becomes. And maybe this is the deeper reason you're here, not just to manifest for yourself, but to awaken the frequency that changes the air for everyone. Most people don't realize they're always dreaming, not just at night, but in every waking moment. The mind is never idle. It's always building, rehearsing, projecting. But for many, that dream runs on autopilot. It's filled with the residue of yesterday's fears, unresolved memories, cultural noise. And so the dream continues, not by design but by default. To dream consciously is not about control. It's about authorship. It's the choice to no longer let imagination wander into worry, regret, or repetition. It's the decision to become aware of the theater playing in your mind and to choose the script, the lighting, the tone, not once but daily, because consciousness is not a one-time awakening. It's a rhythm, a discipline, a sacred routine of remembering. Neville Goddard spoke of mental diets, not for the body but for the soul. A commitment to not feed the mind with inner conversations that contradict your desired state. That doesn't mean perfection. It means awareness. It means catching the moment when your imagination slips into fear and gently guiding it back, not with force, but with familiarity. The first and last moments of your day are doorways, when the mind is most open, when the subconscious is listening. Before sleep, most people replay the day's problems. But what if you edited the scene? What if you visualized the day as it could have been, not to escape it, but to instruct the mind on what to expect tomorrow? That is not fantasy. That is conscious dreaming. When you wake before the world rushes in, you have a window, a moment to choose the frequency of the day, not through affirmation alone, but through internal atmosphere. What you imagine first sets the tone, and what you allow in sets the boundary. Your mind is a studio. Every image, every feeling, every assumption is being recorded, and the universe, like a faithful publisher, releases it into form. So if you don't like what you've been watching, don't criticize the screen. Edit the script. You do not need to imagine more. You need to imagine deliberately. And with every moment of awareness, every redirection of thought, you reclaim the dream. Not as something distant, but as something alive, responsive, sacred. The dream is not what you do when life pauses. It is the silent engine behind everything you call real. And now, you are its director once again. The dream is not something to reach, it's something to remember. Neville taught, live from the end, not as if it might happen, but as if it already has. This shift dissolves the illusion of distance, because as long as you're trying to get there, you're affirming that you're not yet enough. Psychology confirms what mystics have always known. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior reshapes reality. When you become the version of yourself who already has what they desire, you begin to act, feel, and choose from that state, not out of pretense, but alignment. Gratitude becomes the signal that says, "It's already mine." Calm becomes the evidence of trust. These are not moods. They're creative forces that anchor you in the now, where all true change begins. Living from the dream doesn't require grand gestures. It begins in tone of voice, posture, thought, a quiet decision to let your daily life reflect your inner certainty. Like an actor who no longer performs but becomes the role, you stop rehearsing and start being. Not for the world's approval, but because it feels like home. You're not moving toward your vision, you are embodying it, and the world will follow. Neville said, "The world is yourself pushed out," meaning reality is not the source, it's the reflection. What you see outside is the delayed echo of what you've already accepted within. It's not fiction, it's feedback. Bruce Lipton's research affirms this. Your perception, how you interpret and feel life, directs your biology. Your cells don't respond to truth, they respond to belief. You're not reacting to the world, you're instructing it. The shift begins when you stop trying to escape the dream and start dreaming with intention, not to control but to align. Each assumption is a design, each feeling a signal, and the world, silent and obedient, responds. So treat your life as a lucid dream, one shaped not by effort but by emotional authorship. You're not here to prove your worth. You're here to express your wholeness, not later, now. Imagination is not an escape. It's the projector light. What you feel consistently becomes what you see repeatedly. The screen holds no power of its own. The dream was never a fantasy. It was always the foundation, and when you honor it as real, the world becomes the mirror that remembers who you are.